Hi, welcome to the interview series, Transformation Through Creative Expression. I am your host, Crystal Green.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Crystal.
Welcome to the Telesummit, and thank you for being here and sharing with our listeners today. Welcome.
Thanks. Hi.
So, Nancy, you're involved in a variety of creative areas in your life. You have a thriving career in the arts as a painter. You've authored several books on painting. You teach workshops and coach. And you've even had your own puppet theater company while living in New York City. That's amazing. So, in what ways do you think being creative can have a positive impact on our lives?
Well, for one, I definitely believe that being creative has a positive impact. And it's something that I've been thinking about for many, many years. And so it's fun to share it with your listeners. Well, first I want to say that I think as human beings, we're just naturally creative. We're just hardwired to be creative. And that is another way of saying being inquisitive or curious. And I believe it's attached directly to a desire to interact with the world, or more specifically with nature. And we tend to separate ourselves and say, there's us and nature. But we are part of nature. I mean, we're not really separate. It's actually been researched that when we are in and with nature, it's very healing and adds positive impact to our lives. And that makes sense, since being in touch with nature on the outside reminds us and connects us to our inner nature. So I think we will feel our optimal best when we are in and around nature. And there's nature all around us, but if you live in a big city, then sometimes it's just more peripheral, and we don't feel as connected as if we live, say, in a rural area. But, it's funny because raising my son, I live out here now in a mountain desert, so it's still pretty lush. It's not like the Phoenix, Arizona desert. But I see kids, they're inside all day, playing with their iPhones and their computers, and so even if we live in a natural area, it's I think we need to make it a point to be with nature and start to connect again. And that could be, just being in a quiet, meditative way. But I think that when we start to combine being in nature with the physical action, like walking, swimming, working in the garden, rowing a boat, these are all ways of physically responding to nature. And I think that enhances that experience with nature even more. And I think as part of that idea of physical action, making art is a great way to not only be in nature, but also respond to it in a physical way. And there's a nice French word for those who paint from the outdoors and in the outdoors called plein-air painters, plein-air painting.
Mm.
So yeah, I do think that being creative does have a positive impact on our lives, and I think that when we're creative involving nature and, say, making art outdoors, it's one of the best things we can do to feel upbeat and connected. And
being in nature is very powerful, especially it can be very grounding too, especially when you're trying to process information or trying to change patterns. And just because nature is calming and can help you connect back to yourself.
I have some friends, and they always say whenever they're having a difficult time, they just go off and take a hike. And I do too. I mean, it's just I feel so much better when I do that. And I think that making art, even if we're not professional artists and want to make a career out of it, it's just a lovely way to relax and kind of meditate while you're painting, and just be out there and feel like you're, like I said, responding to nature.
Mm-hmm. How would you say that creating art has positively impacted your self-esteem or your confidence levels?
Well, you mean in what ways? Emotionally and?
Yeah, like how has, as you talk about going out in nature, like how has this made you feel more confident in yourself or in your art process?
Oh, yeah. Well, I do work. I mean, I'm a professional painter, so I paint a lot. And I will, when it's nice out, I will, because I'm here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's the southwestern part of the United States, and it's got 4 seasons. So in the winter, it's, ski season. So I'm not going to go out and paint outdoors when it's cold out. But when it's nice, the first thing I want to do is get out there. And, after an hour or so of walking, that's enough walking. So, but when I paint outdoors, I can paint for all day, and I get such a hit, of nature. And so when I paint outdoors, I usually don't use it for my business. I don't sell it. I just use it for me.
Oh, it's
sort of like writing in a diary. I paint from nature. And then on the times when it's raining or snowing and I can't go outside, I paint in my studio, and I can feed off of all that experience of painting from natural things. And it's pretty easy to do. I mean, you can just grab, a box of crayons and a piece of copy paper, and I have a little list too. I wanted to talk about that some more, and just head outdoors and sit down and commune with nature and do some artwork at the same time. But I'm not really answering your question. How in what ways is it positive? I know that when I'm not in nature for many, many days, I feel kind of tense and down, and then as soon as I get outdoors, I feel great. I mean, the sun gives us vitamin D, and, there's a whole lot of benefits, fresh air. But I think when I tend to work in my studio for long periods of time without going and painting outdoors, I tend to get stale. I can feel my ideas in my head. I get tired of them. And when I'm outdoors, if you think about it, if you're painting from outdoors, there's like 360-degree visual information to pick from. And
that's a lot.
It's a lot. Because a lot of people paint from photographs. If you're painting from a photograph of nature, it's already been edited by the camera. It's already got a cropped little area. But when you're sitting there on a rock or on a chair outdoors, you have all of this to pick from, and sometimes it can be overwhelming if you're new to this, to say, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I like. What do I put down? And I like to think of an analogy of the outdoors is like a big prop room, and you're in a theater, and you have a stage to set up, and so you can pick what you want from the prop room, to put on the stage. You're not going to put everything in. And the same with painting outdoors is you're going to find, if a bird flies by, you could put that in, even if it doesn't stay still. So you can, you like a tree that's all the way on the left, you could put it on the right. You can redesign and be inspired by nature. And I think that it's your editing, it's what you decide to put in your painting that makes it interesting for other people to look at.
Since you advocate painting from nature, is all your work about nature, or is it otherwise influenced by nature?
I would say, I even have as a little tagline on my website, nature illuminated. And I think that, I would say, well, back to when I first started, everything is nature. I mean, we really can't. But I tend to paint more organic forms, landscape. They look like landscapes. I don't really do interiors and buildings and cars. And so I really do stick with elements of nature, fire, water, air. I feel like that's a lot of powerful elements, to put in a painting. And, I think that my work would be about nature is a good way to describe it.
is there a way that our listeners can see some of your paintings, some of the examples of what you've just explained?
I have a website. It's nancyrainer.com, and people always spell my name wrong. It's an odd spelling. It's nancyreiner.com. Mm-hmm.
And that'll be in today's email as well for people to look at that.
Oh, good, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you please offer a simple way for someone who may not be a full-time artist or just learning about their creative process to try and respond to nature by making art outdoors?
Sure. I started it off with a very, very simple way of, grab a box of crayons. My idea is it shouldn't be expensive and it shouldn't be difficult. It should be something you can do on a whim. Oh, it's beautiful out. I'm going to grab my box of crayons. And so I would say, make it as comfortable and easy as possible. So wear comfortable clothes, walking shoes, grab an old backpack that you don't care about, that you can stick in the dirt and not care. And in the backpack you have your crayons, and you need a surface to draw or paint on. So that could be as simple as a piece of cardboard. I had said earlier, copy paper, like Xerox paper. And then you need something hard to support it, like a book. Or if you have a blank notebook or a sketch pad that come with cardboard on it. That's really all you need. And then there's some optional things that to get even more comfortable. And that is, the more comfortable you are, the longer you can stay. You can bring a pillow to sit on, maybe a plastic tarp in case you want to sit on, say, grass that's damp. You can bring a portable chair. The art stores have these great chairs. They actually have a handle. You put it over your shoulder and it weighs nothing. And water and a snack, of course. And you might want to upgrade to a full picnic basket, for lunch. Tissues, bug spray, hat, sunscreen. I like to bring a small trash bag so I don't have to put tissues and things on the ground, leave it outdoors. I like to leave it clean. Bringing a camera is nice. Even though I don't usually work from photographs, it's nice to take a picture of what you're working from just for later if you want to look. And and as the list got bigger, these still can be all put in your backpack. And then the good thing is that if you have this backpack and everything's portable, then it's easier to find places that are quiet and not on a public traveling, so that as you drive up to, say, a park, you can hike in maybe half a mile or something so that you don't have a lot of cars and people and traffic. That's it's one of the things that ruins it for me is when I'm painting outdoors and somebody comes by, hey, you're painting, tell me about, now you're in conversation and with a person instead of with your painting. So I like to get away from people. And I used to have a dog that I brought with me. So it's nice to, if you don't have a dog, and my dog passed away, so now when I go out, the first time I went out without the dog, I felt really funny. I usually feel very safe, but I felt a little odd because I went really out in the middle of nowhere, and there I was by myself, So I like to have a friend. I have a friend that likes to also paint outdoors, and we'll sort of travel together, and sometimes we'll be shouting distance apart. If something happens, it's a good idea.
Yeah, you've got someone. So, as an example, can you share a story of one of your plein-air experiences?
Sure. Oh, before I start on that, I just realized that the other thing that's really good is if you have a car that opens in the back, then you can just sit in the back of your car, and it's really easy, and it also provides shade in a sunny area. So, that is something that I really like to do. It's not really being in nature, but it sort of is. I would say when you asked that question, the first thing that came to mind was when I used to live in New York City, and this many years ago, and when I first moved to Santa Fe out here, that was quite a shock going from this big bustly city to this big, wide, open mountain area. And And I was used to New York City. I felt very safe in New York City because I knew where I was going. But out here, it sounds odd. It should be the opposite. But out here with all of this big, wide open space, it felt very scary. I think it's just whatever we're used to. So I thought, I'm going to go outdoors and paint because that will help me connect to this new environment. And I remember that I would, I'd have one day, I called it my scouting day. And I would just get in the car with my dog with a packed lunch and water, and I would travel to places people had told me about or things that I read about and check them out. And maybe go to 3 or 4 places in one day and pick my favorite for the next day to then go back. And I was more prepared because I knew where I was going and would there be shade there or not. And then I would paint the next day. And I kept doing that maybe a couple times. Like one scouting day could give me enough places for the next 3 or 4 painting sessions. And I would do that maybe 3 times a week. I did that for quite a long time, and then it really, well, then the weather changed, and then I couldn't paint out there. And that's when I realized when I was painting in my studio that it was feeding me a lot. It was giving me a lot of visual information in my memory, my painting memory, that really ended up in my work, making my work a lot richer. And so, I really think this is a good idea for people, whether you're a professional painter or just never painted before in your life. And here's some tips, I think, is that you can actually start by just making art in the comfort of your home by looking out a window, if you have a view out a window. And if you don't, you could go to a friend's house, that has a better view. But working from photographs is not the same as working directly, as I had mentioned before. You have all this information that's different than a camera does edit. A camera does change things. I'm sorry, Crystal?
I think that's a very valid point, that you're able to edit and you get to choose which parts of the environment you're going to include in your painting. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up again because I think there's some people believe that a good painting is one that replicates a photograph, and they think that the technical expertise is something to be valued, and that's one opinion. But for me, as a painter, I believe that it's the expression of the person while they're making the piece, what they decide to put in, what they decide to take out, and how they decide to display it, how they decide to picture it. So when you're out there and you see this big blue sky and there's lots of trees in front of it, you might just want to do the sky and eliminate the trees, and brighten the colors or exaggerate things. And so it's really expressing our personality through what we're seeing onto the paper that I think makes painting more exciting rather than technical proficiency to replicate a photograph. That's a whole different thing. So, and since we're talking about this, I think that the best thing to do is to remember that it's about playing out there and responding to nature. It's not about making a masterpiece or making something that you think is supposed to be artwork. Just be surprised. I think play around and allow yourself to be surprised by what you end up with. So, and it could be as little as 15 minutes. You go out with your lunch, you do 15 minutes, and then you sit there, have your lunch, and walk around a little and come back home. The idea is about expressing yourself and feeling positive, and some people might decide to spend all day, that. The other thing is I think it's good to kind of do some research online and see if there's some public area. You don't have to go that far from home. Often there's botanical gardens, parks, and sometimes museums have special nature areas, where you can sit and you might want to go there in advance and ask for permission to paint there, just in case you don't want a guard to come over and kick you out while you're all set up. The other thing I'd like to recommend is that instead of crayons, if you want, you can upgrade to oil pastels. And oil pastels are one of my favorite mediums to work in. They're super fun. It's like drawing with lipstick. and you can get a cheap set at a hobby store. If you do decide to use oil pastels, I just want to say, bring baby oil in a baggie. You don't want it to spill all over. And paper towels, and you can clean your hands off. You don't need a sink and soap, but it'll just come right off with the baby oil.
Okay. Do you have any other tips for our listeners today?
I just want to mention again that that it's best to allow yourself to play rather than say, I need to make it like a photograph, and to understand that someone sitting in that exact same spot would make a totally different painting than you would, even though you're both looking at the same scene. It's that idea of editing that we talked about a couple times is really your true response to nature, and that is what's going to come through in the work.
And that's so healing too. It's your work.
Yeah, and I think the more you allow yourself to play, you're really in that present moment. And maybe that's what it is about nature that allows us to feel so good, is that when you're there, there's so much around you, the sounds and the smells and the sights, and we're just surrounded by our true nature, nature. And so we can be more in that present moment rather than answering the phone every 2 seconds and being split here and there. But I really think that being creative is the best way to stay positive, healthy, happy. And by doing that, often people say, well, that's a selfish thing. When are you going to help the world, And I really believe that you can't do anything positive in the world unless you feel positive yourself first. So I hope everyone goes and tries this and then emails back and let me know.
All right. Thank you for your time today, Nancy.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you for speaking to myself and our listeners.